Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another episode of the Bright Now podcast. We're recording this on Saturday, June 8th at noon Eastern Time. My name is Dash, and I am the Peter Griffin to my Randy Marsh. TJ, how are you doing today, brother, and what are we yapping about?
Doing great, my man. Kicking things off with a recap of the Game 1 of the NBA Finals with Boston just putting it on Dallas, winning by 18 points in that one. Going to be breaking down our Game 2 picks as that gets ready to tip off tomorrow, Sunday, June 9th. And then wrapping it up talking about the only other piece of news in the basketball world right now, and that is Dan Hurley allegedly in talks to join the Lakers as their new head coach. So starting things off with the Boston win, 107-89, like I said, 18 points. Dallas, tried to make it a game at one point in the third, cutting the lead down to 8, but it was really just too much, too deep of a hole to get out of. I think the story of the game, at least in my mind, is firmly that first quarter and partially the first half of Kristaps Porzingis. He finishes with 20 points, 8 for 13, and 3 blocks after not playing in like 40 days, basically. So I think that's where it just starts with me. And if the series was one game, like Porzingis would be the MVP of the finals right now.
Yeah, man, like going into the game, TJ, I was thinking, I saw the stat, they put up the graphic. It's like this would be Kristaps Porzingis' first playoff game outside of the first round in his entire career. I was feeling a little shaky. What is it, like almost 30 days that he hasn't played an NBA basketball game up until that point.
Mm-hmm. And then he's not starting. And then he's not starting, so you're even more like, oh shit, maybe he's not ready for this.
Yeah, and I guess in the arena, they had the whole team come out initially, and everybody was out there on the court except Porzingis, so just really, really giving the fans a heart drop at first there, but absolutely came out and dominated. Obviously super impressed with that high post work that he had multiple times where it's just facing up at the top right there. Me and you are both big high post guys, so I mean...
It's my favorite kind of basketball.
Exactly. I don't want to speak for both of us, but I think we're both loving it, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. And he had one possession early too where he drove to the hoop and just kind of lost it, got kind of bumped, and I was like, oh, great. We're going to get soft Porzingis in this one. And then, no, but he just stayed with it. It really kicked off with he drew a foul on Luka in the high post, just trying to, kind of pump fake jab, put it up over him. And then from there, he was just money. His one drive, his shot fake drive for the dunk was just exactly what you want to see from him. Speaking of that, Al Horford had a crazy one to start the game too. How are you biting on an Al Horford pump fake that bad and then just getting yammed on at the rim? It just came out of the gates hot for Boston. But like we said, it was when the starters were in, it was pretty even, and Porzingis gets subbed in, and that's when they just end up going on that crazy run. At one point in the first quarter, it's 20-15 with about 5 minutes left, and it finishes 37-20. So on a 17-5 run there, they scored 9 points in the final minute and a half with the barrage of threes, the Tatum, Porzingis, and then Sam Hauser with a fadeaway in the corner. How are you going to beat that? If they're going to be knocking threes down at that level, you're just in a bad space, especially when you're Luka. Obviously 30 points, he's going to always get his, but 12 for 26 from the field, that is an excellent outcome for Boston. And then Kyrie with only 12 points, just really struggling from the field by all accounts. He's just got to hit shots. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, and speaking of some of the Mavericks' flaws, I just want to start by saying, TJ, for both of us, I think having Derek Lively wasn't a bad pick for the X factor, but obviously Kyrie wasn't a bad pick either, because we saw both of these guys just kind of getting negated. You see in that fourth quarter that Derek Lively had 0 points and 5 fouls at one point, eventually getting himself a bucket, a dunk. But I guess I just wasn't expecting both of these guys to not be key contributors, and it's not entirely their fault. Can we talk about the Celtics defense a little bit here? Just because, yeah, it is their identity. It's what they fall back on, their bread and butter at the end of the day, and it was fucking there on Thursday. Jaylen Brown having his starting assignment on Luka.
75 feet from the basket, basically all game, picking his pocket in that first half as well. I just think the Mavericks or the Celtics did a great job of just staying disciplined against this Mavericks team. Minnesota kind of got out over their skis a little bit, sending a lot of doubles, which just creates scramble opportunities on the backside. And Luka's too much of a tactician to not take advantage. And Boston's just staying home, guarding him with one man, obviously showing strong help, but the lobs were just completely negated in this game. Like, I think that they only ever got like 2 of them up at the end of the day, and that was one of the biggest driving factors in why we thought, Lively and Gafford would be high impact players in this series. And then the other end of it, actually, go ahead. Do you have any thoughts on that initial part? Because there's something else with the defense that really jumped out.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that was the Mavericks, I think, road to victory throughout all 3 of these playoff series. Was just absolutely abusing any of the slower bigs that couldn't really get there. I mean, we're looking at Ivanka Zubac. We're looking at Chet Holmgren. I mean, absolutely lengthy young player. But at the end of the day, it's nobody who has as much skill and as much IQ and a little bit of muscle mass like Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis. Because let's not forget, Al Horford was also mucking it up in that middle as well. And even Jaylen Brown had himself a lob denial at one point and then came back and then blocked it again in the same exact possession. Super impressive on that end of the floor. And I think going hand in hand with this, to go off of what you were speaking about, playing so straight up, is having Luka only get 1 assist this entire game.
Crazy.
The Mavericks altogether had 9 assists as a team for a playoff game, and I feel like that's a record for like least amount of assists. But it was really smart in the Boston Celtics end. It's absolutely closing those gaps. I don't know if that's what you were going to go off of right there, but just making the Dallas Mavericks go ahead and have Luka push up the ball and give it to somebody and ask them to be even a little bit of a shot creator. And even in that, I mean, all these individual defenders are just absolutely phenomenal. And this has to be one of the best scrambling teams I've ever seen as well. Because whenever they were sending that double just to muck it up to that point of attack, it was absolutely beautiful rotations. And you can even have guys like Derek White guarding a PJ Washington despite the height difference and weight difference. And it's still going to hold up. I mean, Derek White has shown time and time again he's one of the best defending backcourt guys in the entire league.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I just did a quick fact check on the lowest assist in the finals. So it's the lowest since 1999, where the Knicks had 8 in a game against the Spurs. But the lowest is actually the Celtics with 5 assists in 1960 against the St. Louis Hawks, which they did go on to win that series.
Fuck you, Bob.
But yeah, so it's the 3rd least of all time with only 9 assists in that game. Absolutely insane, especially when you expect Luka to get 9 on his own. But the part with the defense that almost makes or break the game in my mind is the Celtics had 9 blocks.
Woo.
Which is that in a game where you lose by 18 points, that is almost practically the entire game if you assume that those shots just go in for 2, and a couple of them were on 3s. But Porzingis is everywhere, making the huge play that Jason Tatum has that bad turnover at the end of the half, and Porzingis is just on the other end and just meets him at the rim to send it away. That along with the 3-point difference is the game.
And how about that Kyrie block jump shot from Kristaps Porzingis? You don't see that often at all.
No, you do not see Kyrie get blocked.
Or who the hell is who the hell does Green think he is coming down and trying to get him on Kristaps? Why do they keep testing him? Why do they keep testing the man?
Because even if you think his athleticism isn't all the way there just from not playing recently and just coming off injuries, he's still 7'4".
Yes.
He was playing out of it. Honest, I don't think it's unfair to say that it might be the best game of his career. And he scored 2 points in the second half. But all of his points came at the most impactful time during this game. Like I said, I know that the Mavericks started to kind of chop back, and it's always going to be a game of runs. But when you go down they're down 29 at one point. They have their score doubled up on them. You're not going to be able to get back on that.
No, as much, and like you said, we talked about it over and over, as much as they want to come back and make it an 8-point game, I mean, at the end of the day, they just stepped on their necks in that second half. And one of those things I wanted to bring up, still sticking on the defensive end, is Jrue Holiday, TJ. I mean, getting that assignment, going on to Luka in that third quarter when things are getting a little too hectic, put the vet out there, put the guy that has a chip to go out here and stop him, because, man, I was super impressed with Jrue Holiday just being an absolute pest. And I mean, the steal in the backcourt one-on-one was huge from Jrue Holiday. And then, I mean, offensively, Jrue Holiday had one possession where he caught it in the high post. I can't remember who was guarding him. It was somebody who had a little bit of size and height on him, but he said, fuck it, I'm posting you, crab dribble all the way to the rack and just got an easy layup. Just absolutely beautiful to see from Jrue Holiday. Not to be that basketball guy, but an actual winner. I think that motherfucker's a winner right there.
100%. 100%.
But going on to the Mavs flaws right here, TJ. What were some of the things that you saw that led to the stagnation? But besides obviously just the defense, or do you think it was the defense?
Yeah, I think it really was just the looks that the Boston was giving Dallas. It just wasn't there. And when all those other guys, because the only guys on the Mavericks that can really create for themselves and for other people are Luka and Kyrie. And when they're limiting those guys' creation off the dribble, and PJ Washington is catching the ball, where in the past series, like against Minnesota, against OKC, he's just catch and shoot threes, maybe a couple of dribbles to get to the lane, but nothing really where he has to, actually put a move on somebody. And they were just forcing the Mavericks into so many of those possessions this game. Like, Dallas just doesn't have the creators for Kyrie to have an off night at this level in the finals. Like, it's just not going to happen. It worked okay against the Thunder, just a really young team, and they were able to exploit some disadvantages there. But you're just not going to be able to do that against a team as well-rounded as Boston. Every guy in their rotation is a solid defender and a solid offensive player, if not better in either one of those categories. They got a bare minimum. They're all, very capable on both ends of the floor, and Dallas just just can't match up with them in that same way when Kyrie's going to shoot 6 for 19 and score 12 points. Like, it's just not going to happen. And then, those two guys combining for 7 turnovers doesn't help. That was another decent sized factor in this game. The Celtics scoring 18 off turnovers, Dallas only 13. And then it really, at the end of the day, I mean, it's surprising it took us this long to say it, but they just shot way more threes than them. Celtics shot 42 threes and made 7 more. Like, that's a 21-point difference there alone. So you factor that in with the amount of blocks that they got, with the points off turnovers. Like, it's a surprise that they didn't win by more than 18.
You're right. And I don't disagree with anything you say right here, TJ. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with the Game 2 preview, but I am familiar with the Mavericks as long as Luka's been on that team and Jason Kidd has been the coach. This team is known to be a Game 1 tester kind of team. We look at the Clippers going down and losing that Game 1 right there, going against OKC Thunder. I mean, not pulling out all the tricks in their bag. That's why the Timberwolves series was kind of an anomaly, because it just seemed like right out the gate it was like, fuck out of my way, Karl-Anthony Towns, I'm getting my buckets. But I do see a world where there are some adjustments made. I still came out of this thinking that the Celtics are beatable, and I know that sounds crazy, but some of the things that I saw was obviously Tatum settling on 3-pointers. This is something we've talked about all year, talked about the year before that, and talked about the year before that. And it's just Tatum hits enough of them where it's like, yeah, no, that's okay, like, keep shooting that. But I think when it comes down to it, you're not going to be shooting. I don't know if you could pull up the stats, but I don't know what exactly the Celtics were shooting. Very high clip. Like I said, the amount of volume that they had, and even if they're shooting 35% as a team, that shit is still absolutely phenomenal for them. But there are going to be games, we've seen the Celtics before, and that's why in this Game 2, I question whether the Celtics will be able to keep this up, because we've seen them drop games before when they're not able to shoot the ball. Do you want to go into the preview right now, or do you have anything you want to touch on in that Game 1?
Yeah, because my final point was really just about Tatum not totally showing up, and like the weird Doris Burke and Jason Tatum obsession that she has when announcing games. Like, oh, but he's still been so impactful and doing like, bro, he had 16 points in Game 1 of the finals as a first-team All-NBA guy. That's a bad game no matter how you shake it. He just got lucky because their roster was just dominant top to bottom. So yeah, definitely some. There's still some weaknesses in the armor for sure on Boston's side, and it starts with Jason Tatum. I know. So leading into the Game 2 preview, like, who knows? Maybe Jason Tatum decides that he needs to try and be the hero, and I think that's a great recipe for success for Dallas if they are able to just keep him settling for jumpers, but thinking that it all rests on his shoulders when in all actuality it doesn't at all. That's where, if it starts turning into a Tatum versus Luka just shootout, like the edge goes to Luka every time. And so I think that's where something where maybe force the ball into Tatum's hand a little bit more and just see what you can get out of it.
You're right. What would you say? I know that this game was a blowout at the end of the day, but if you were to say that Kyrie steps up his game to a usual Kyrie level and that Tatum was able to step up his game to a Tatum level, are we seeing the same outcome, or are we slightly seeing the Mavs make it at least closer? Do you see the Mavs winning? And when I talk about a Kyrie level, I mean like Kyrie finals, like 27 to 33 points a game type of thing.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a huge difference maker, because going from 12 to 25 points, that closes the gap in a really big way. And then the other piece is the Luka assist factor and trying to get other guys involved instead of just, only kind of hunting his own shots. Not that he wasn't looking for other guys, just those opportunities weren't all the way there. And he shot 33% from three himself. Like he was 4 for 12. Like those are some big differences that, although it is an 18-point loss and it feels really bad, they cut it to 8 at one point and really had a shot. That was just when Jaylen Brown kind of decided, okay, like Tatum's not showing up tonight. I really got to step it up. And that's when, 6 points in that third quarter. He finishes with another 6 in the fourth, which was just big-time buckets in the most important game of the season.
Do you see the universe? What are you feeling? What are you leaning towards? Is it a Jaylen Brown Finals MVP, or are you still having your faith in Tatum? And if you want to go to the Porzingis route, I hear you. I don't know if I can expect another game like that from him just right off the bat, but I'd love for him to prove me wrong. But what are you leaning with at this moment?
So I've always kind of been a Brown. Not that I ever thought Brown was better than Tatum, but I was just liked watching Brown's game a little bit more than Jason Tatum and the way he played on both ends of the floor. So if it does kind of continue like this and Jason Tatum is up and down throughout the series, like I think Brown is the kind of the clear-cut favorite for the Finals MVP on that side. If they had won it in 22, he would have been the Finals MVP that year as well. He won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely it seems like we're leaning Jaylen Brown at this time because you're right. In game one, it was Porzingis was the most important difference maker, but we can't expect that from him every night because that's just not who he's always been. He'll probably be about 15 points a game the rest of the way.
Yeah, and sticking with Jaylen Brown, I mean, this has to be one of my favorite Jaylen Brown game watches that I've seen. Like I said, the 22 points were explosive. Coming down the lane that one time where he just mixed Luka, came down and just with his right hand just yammed on everybody. Mm-hmm. That was pretty sexy. Just him being able to take that tough assignment at the beginning of the game. Really impressed with him. And just it seems like he's is matured the right word? Feels weird as a 22-year-old saying that a grown man, 28-year-old hasn't matured, but it does seem like he has matured in a sense, even just like the past year, being able to get his handles a little better.
Yeah, I was just going to say the handle is tightened up a ton for him. Like it is just not like the play you're talking about where he gets the dunk in the middle. It's like coming left off a screen, hard, like between the legs cross, and then just exploding towards the rim. Like he really has stepped up that game in a weird way too, because you don't really often see guys sign the biggest contract in league history and then continue to improve their game. Usually that's when things start to balance off. You're like, oh, well, I already got paid for what I've done in the past. Like, I don't need to do anything forward. But he had probably heard the chirps about, oh, this guy's the best player of all time. He can't even dribble with his left. Like, it sounds like he took some of that stuff to heart.
As he should. And it looks like it's paying off right here. With this Game 2 prediction, are you thinking that, I mean, I got some thoughts of my own. I kind of want to hear yours first, though. Are you concerned at all with like the history of Boston in that Game 2 in the Garden type feel? I mean, even going back historically, they had the Garden Massacre in that 1980s, and then they came down to lose that series. Is there any thoughts right there in your head with Boston?
Yeah, so Boston's coming. Last game they were favored by 6.5. This game it's jumped up to 7.5 favorites at home. So the Vegas definitely thinks Boston's going to come out again, or maybe they're just trying to catch us on those odds a little bit. But after seeing that game, it's hard to watch that entire game and then say, oh yeah, the Mavericks are going to come back and win Game 2. Like they didn't really show us anything that they are ready to make that jump. Maybe things change at home. The one thing I would expect is to Kyrie to come out a lot more forceful early on in the game. He'd gotten some, early buckets. He had that left-handed floater that was really that was big time before things really turned ugly. So that's where the biggest difference needs to come if Dallas is going to win. It's going to be from Kyrie scoring more points because you just can't put that on PJ Washington or Derek Lively to step up in really like large ways. And Dallas clearly has the firepower to compete. They bring it back from 29 points down to only 8 points down. Like that's a huge swing. But if you dig yourself a hole that early, you're kind of screwed. So I would expect a closer game. And again, would probably lean to Mavericks plus 7.5 if you're going to be gambling on it. But man, it's hard to say. Like after game one, I just feel like the Celtics are damn near unbeatable. We talked about it all year. They were the favorites going into the season next to Denver to win it. and they just steamrolled everybody on their way to taking a 1-0 lead in the finals.
Yeah. Another question I had for you. Well, I mean, I would also take that Dallas +7. I think that the game's going to be a little closer. I could even see, like I said, they haven't shown me anything from that game one, but in terms of just historically how Boston has reacted in previous instances.
And Dallas has made adjustments. Like you said, they've lost a couple of game ones already this year, and they come back and figure out how to get it back. It's not lost. Like, you got to take care of your home games. They're going to have to steal one on the road to win this series, period. And game 2 is probably the perfect time to get that done.
Yeah, no, 100% right. Man, I am still excited for this series. Me and you talked about it a little bit. There are parts of us that are nervous that this is going to be kind of a blowout series. Even if it goes the opposite way, I'm not trying to see a Mavericks 20-point win against the Celtics team, preferably. Like, I'm trying to see some good, close basketball throughout the whole game. And we talked about a little bit like how the playoffs. I mean, the last time that we've had something that's like super meaningfully close is Game 2 of the Timberwolves series, where Luka went ahead and hit that big time shot over Rudy Gobert. And I mean, I know that's a lot to ask for, a game winner step back on the Defensive Player of the Year. That's hard expectations to live up to. But I am looking for closer games.
Yeah, I just want it to be an actual contest in the fourth quarter, which this one just flat out wasn't. And a lot of games in this playoffs have just straight up not been. Going back to Phoenix versus Minnesota, none of those games were close. Going into the next rounds, Minnesota-Denver was a great series, but a lot of those games were also ass whoopings too, both directions.
70-point loss in one of them.
Yeah, so it's been a really weird playoffs in that matter, and this is something that I know I saw on Twitter this morning. It was the least watched game 1 of the finals, excluding those COVID years, which I don't know why we need to exclude those. Like, the games were still on TV. I don't know why people wouldn't watch because it's COVID. But the lowest since 2007. And So I just wonder, does the NBA have a problem with, maybe folks, when they did get to a blowout, all right, switching the channel and turning something else on? Like, hey, we're going to go check out the Indiana Fever. It looks like Caitlin Clark's going off tonight in a close game. So I think that is definitely a point of concern for the NBA, even though we've talked about how good it is to have the parity and having, no repeat champions for however long it's been now, 6 years, something like that. It's just, is that actually good for the league, or do people want, the Warriors versus Cavaliers clashes that we saw for 5 years in a row?
I think it's an interesting topic you bring up. I've actually talked to people that say they like the dynasty era of the NBA. It gives them, especially a lot of casual fans that like to pick like the best player on every year and just constantly switching between players, which I think is fraudulent as a diehard basketball fan. But I understand from a casual perspective, you want to see the Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors go off. Like even if you're a Spurs fan, you like that boring type of basketball that's consistent dominance. I do understand it from that perspective, but as a guy who lived through that and who complained over and over, I mean, that's like complaining about your plate's full and you've been hungry the whole time. I mean, you got a lot on your plate and you're hungry. It's the same thing. You can't be bitching and complaining about it, and once you actually get it, you want to go back and reminisce on the old days of when you knew who the fuck was going to be in the finals every single year.
Yeah.
Do you like the dynasty? Is there a part of you that likes the dynasties? Because I won't lie, I think there's a small part of me that likes it in terms of the villain aspect. Going back to those Heedle days, it was very, very, very fun to root against LeBron. Became the biggest Tim Duncan fan in the world for 2 years straight. Are you a fan of the dynasties at all? Is there a part of you that likes it?
Yeah, I think there is a part of me that it is fun to, like you said, have the one villain that everybody's trying to beat. And it kind of felt like the Nuggets, we were trying to shoehorn them into that role, which just didn't totally fit. Like, Jokic's personality just isn't that of somebody to really be a villain. And people have liked like this Celtics team, although not like an official dynasty because they haven't won a chip with this core. But to be in the Eastern Conference Finals was 6 years in a row. It is kind of on the verge of that. So you'd think people would be invested in seeing this. And like Luka is one of the faces of the league. Tatum, a very marketable guy that everybody knows like his kid's name. So it's surprising to me that this finals is being less watched. But that's just been kind of a consistency and a problem with the NBA is people that just feel content to follow the game on social media, check in with the scores, and watch the highlights. Like, how do you get people to watch more games? It's the question that the NBA has to answer like as soon as possible.
Yeah, I hope they do. I want the sport to be alive for as long as we can. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on specifically in this series?
I just really want these next games to be close. That's really it. Either direction, either side winning, I can see the pros and cons to kind of how basketball discourse will go. Obviously, the Luka narrative, if he wins, is going to be crazy. Just best player on the planet sort of things. And if the Celtics win, I also like the argument that, hey, continuity is a very powerful thing. And they're a team that, no matter how many times people have said to them to blow it up and break those two guys apart, that they're still riding with it. And so that's part of it that I would really appreciate if the Celtics get it done.
Yeah, or even talking about like how our buddy CJ, we have a little group chat, he was talking about how like the advanced stats nerds are going to be, foaming at the mouth seeing that this Boston Celtics team is winning, shooting mostly deep three-pointers and getting to the rack. So, it's going to be really cool for that side. Random question I wanted to bring up earlier that I just remembered. Were you a little confused, or could you see, I guess, Josh Green getting more minutes in this next game, or potentially Dante Exum? We saw Tim Hardaway Jr. get out there, and why? He hasn't played throughout this whole playoffs. Like, I know he's been hurt, but why is he playing all of a sudden? Just go ahead and throw him in the fire for 18 minutes? What?
Yeah, they're probably going to need more shooting, which is where Josh Green and Tim Hardaway Jr. do come in. Josh Green, you 1-for-1 in this game, so just got to get some higher volume going out there.
And it was in garbage time.
So, yeah, I think that would be one route to change things up. Maybe since the lobs aren't there, you just really try to go small and see if you can get away with it with Kleba at the 5, which they went to for a handful of minutes in this game. So that's one shift that could, have some implications going forward. But
Kleber seemed a little nervous, TJ. There was one point we had a wide open 3, and Maxi Kleber, the best 3-point fucking playoff shooter of all time when he goes against the Suns, but he's scared to take it in the finals against the Celtics?
Yeah, exactly. Just a lot of weird moments from the Mavericks on that end. And so I expect Jason Kidd to make some meaningful adjustments, and that might be where it comes from. But if you're banking on, Maxi Kleber and Josh Green and Tim Hardaway Jr. to save your season, like you're looking in the wrong places. It starts with Kyrie.
Yeah, that'd be bad news. All right, some basketball news that we're looking at. TJ, we got our guy Dan Hurley for UConn men's basketball looking to get the job for the Los Angeles Lakers. So first and foremost, I thought the JJ thing was locked up. The way that Shams was reporting it, didn't it sound like it was locked up, or am I confused?
People are turning that into like a Shams versus Woj like civil war.
Yeah.
Basically, where maybe it just was always bogus from Shams, and we've seen him, slip up on a few things in the past, like at that pre-draft where he Scoot's number 2, and people are accusing him of just trying to shift the betting lines for his bosses over at FanDuel.
Yeah.
Definitely some concerns there. You know how I feel about those Scoops guys anyway, Woj and Shams. They give no actual value to NBA fans. They just say things first. All information that we would find out about eventually. And the Dan Hurley thing was just pissing me off yesterday. We were on the phone when it had popped up, but I was on my lunch break from work, turned on ESPN, and Get Up's going. I usually don't watch, but it was just one of those days. I'm like, okay, let's see what they got. They talked about this Dan Hurley thing for fucking 25 minutes. It was like half of the fucking show was just spitballing about if this guy is going to take the job. I personally don't think he will. I don't see how you can win back-to-back NCAA titles. Going into this next season, they're going to have a top 10 team in the preseason as well, probably top 5. And for a chance to three-peat and to really become a god in college basketball, I don't see why you shift that, especially with a guy that's as intense as Dan Hurley, because he's clearly going to have to pull back on that if he's going to coach a LeBron James-led team. I would not be lining up, especially if I'm a guy that likes having some control over my organization, would not be signing up to join a LeBron team. He's probably the number 1 coach killer of all time. Just make him the player coach at this point. I just don't see it. That was my problem with JJ Redick taking the job too. It's like he has no experience at it. LeBron's just going to be calling all the shots, and they start the season 3-7, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, JJ Redick doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah. I think one of the main points that you hit on that I strongly agree with is Dan Hurley's style of coaching, meshing in with NBA, very established players like LeBron James and Anthony Davis. how do you expect to come into a team that has multi millionaires on there, not being able to use the same kind of coaching techniques, such as screaming at your players? Because if you look at any of the behind the scenes or at practice film with Hurley, I mean, man, he is on their ass from start to finish that whole practice, chewing guys out. And I just don't see a universe where LeBron is okay with that. I mean, cool, you got your 2 college national championships. Motherfucker, I got 4 rings in the highest level of competition in the entire world. It's just going to be hard for him to tell him anything, I feel like, at the end of the day. But, I mean, it's getting to the point. I mean, USA basketball is coming up. We see a lot of pictures. Got LeBron out there practicing with the squad already. It's getting down to the point where you probably need your coach in there as soon as possible. I know the playoffs are still going on. We're looking at the finals, but for a team that wants to be a contender, that's going to be a move that you need to make now. Ask the Milwaukee Bucks about switching coaches midseason. Worked out for them real well.
Yeah, and if Dan Hurley's thinking like, okay, well, I'll come in and it'll be my organization. Like, you got LeBron leaving in 2 or 3 seasons. Like, he can't play forever. That's just not going to be possible. I don't know what kind of real pressure the Lakers are putting on to draft Bronny, but I can't imagine Dan Hurley signing up for that experience and that whole circus to be on his team. And you're going from a college program where he's the general manager, the head coach, like he is the owner, he is everything to that like basketball organization, where you're just where will have a lot less responsibility with the Lakers, like not dealing with the transfer portal, not dealing with NIL stuff. You know, you got a whole team of front office people handling all that sort of business. But I don't know if he wants to do that. Like, I don't see why you would step away. Obviously, the money is the biggest factor. Like, if they are going to pay him $100 million over 6 or 7 years, it'd be hard to turn that money down, and that's what's being floated around a lot. There's also just not a ton of success stories of guys going from college to the NBA. Like, Brad Stevens is one of them. But we've seen Rick Pitino was bad. John Calipari was bad. John Beilein was bad. Billy Donovan is just a regular guy in the NBA now from being one of the top tier coaches in college. Like, it's not a different sport, obviously, but it's very different. It's very different in the way a head coach can, run his program.
Shit, damn near is a different sport, it feels like, though, at points. You're absolutely right, though, that the college to NBA pipeline has not always been super successful. And as much as I like Dan Hurley and the way that he runs his program, I'm not sure if it's going to work. They actually talked about it on Mind the Game, the JJ Redick and LeBron podcast. Funny enough, they both were just goozing and gazzing over one of the plays that they had drawn up over there at UConn. So it's just ironic to see that come into fruition, those guys going ahead and giving props to a guy that could potentially be the next head coach.
Well, then I heard some other folks talking about where UConn's assistant coach, I can't remember his name, but once he got brought in is really when things started to shift for that UConn program under Hurley, where he was like the offensive guru, and a lot of that stuff wasn't coming from Dan Hurley. He was much more of like the defensive focused guy and just an energy giver. And for all the talk about him being super intense, usually you think of that in a negative light, but he's also intensely positive too, like chest bumping his guys, getting guys hyped up. And I just worry that NBA players are just going to be like, oh, this is corny, like, I'm LeBron James. Why am I fucking getting all excited about this? He's just going to do the same shit he's done with every other head coach he's gotten, where they'll see some success and everyone gives all the credit to LeBron. They start getting beat down and it's all the coach's fault. Like, I just would not be signing up to join that organization.
Woo. We'll see. Man, it's a weird time in the NBA, right? Because we got all this time in between finals games, and I just don't know what kind of news is going to be floating out there. There was some NBA player that got arrested last night. I can't remember who it was. So it's just like little things like that are just floating around. Former NBA player like arrested on some crazy shit.
It was Delonte West. It was Delonte West.
Delonte West. That's who it was. Delonte West. Hey, free him. I don't know what he did. Hopefully it wasn't bad. Actually, let me retract my statement. Let me do some research. Bro, do you remember when Sean Kemp was like accused of being a part of like a drive-by shooting like 2 years ago?
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, fucking what the hell is going on with some of these guys? God damn it.
Oh, Big Baby Davis, bro. He got locked up too, didn't he?
Yeah, that was like financial crimes too. Like, it was like tax evasion or like some like falsifying records shit, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's some shit I'm trying to be on. No, I'm joking. IRS, just joking. I pay my taxes. All right, anything else you want to wrap up with, TJ?
Nah, I just hoping that game 2 is a little bit more exciting than game 1. What time does that tip off tomorrow? I guess
5:30 your time, I believe.
8 my time. Holy hell.
Overtime.
Golly. And then they're not going again until Wednesday. What the fuck,
Yeah,
NBA? Like, let's get this shit on the road. Let's see what's happening, man.
Is it just because the first year we're covering it, or does it feel like these are like more days in between?
It hurt the conference finals going so short, because the NBA finals is always scheduled to start on like one very specific day, and they just don't budge on that when it comes down to it. So that's obviously a big factor. And you kind of, theoretically you'd get better basketball if guys get a couple of more days off, but let's just get it. They should be playing game 2 tonight. Like, let's get it.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Bright Now Podcast, number 46 in the books. Like I said, appreciate you guys for tapping in as always. Y'all guys have a phenomenal rest of your night.